This week I'm reviewing a fluorescent light which is budget friendly and yet still very impressive. Hello, my name is Simon Cade and this is DSLRguide. So I picked up this fluorescent light a couple of weeks ago for £75, which I think is a pretty good deal, and you can see how cheap it is by the fact that I don't actually have a product name for it. So the best way I recommend you try and find this light is to look on eBay and find the cheapest thing which has 4 bulbs and has the metal bowl around those bulbs, because I think then if you buy that, then that'll probably be very similar to the light that I've got. Now this light is very impressive when you consider how much it cost. I have a background in LEDs, and although LEDs are great, I do always miss the amount of power that you can get from this whenever I go back to my LEDs. So it's a £75 light, it has 4 85-watt bulbs, and with those 4 lights you get a light source which is much brighter than my R300 ring light, for example. So the idea with this light is pretty simple. It has 4 E27 mount sockets with 4 85-watt bulbs in them, and then it has the reflective bowl around it, which is very important because the way these bulbs work, most of the light actually comes from the side. So it's very important that you have one that has the bowl around so that it reflects as much of the light forward as possible. And on the back of the unit it has 2 switches, so you can half the amount of power to just use 2 bulbs. And it also has a nice long power cable, as well as a standard mount so you can attach it to a light stand or a C-stand. Now it does have a tilt feature to it, but I have to say that whole construction of that part is very low quality, and it's quite difficult actually to maneuver the light around. So the way I like to use it is to just put a stud in the end and then just put it on the C-stand. That way I can use the C-stand to position the light and don't have to worry about that cheap plastic mount. So for a very low price you get a light which works brilliantly as a key light since it's so soft and so bright. But I would like to mention that the bulbs that come with it, which are these ones, these are not the highest quality bulbs. Now if you think about it, the whole thing costs £75 and there are 4 bulbs, so these bulbs have got to be worth definitely less than £10. But the problem with these bulbs is they do have a green tint, so anytime you use this light it will cast a slightly green tint to your footage. Now this can be solved by doing manual white balance, which will then mean that the camera compensates for that green, but then the problem is if you have any daylight in your scene, then the daylight will be slightly too red or slightly too magenta to counter the green. So while it is definitely possible to use these lights, if you have 3 of them you can just set your white balance and it'll just get rid of that green. But I personally do like to have lights which don't have any tints to them, and there is a very inexpensive way of doing this. So I ordered 2 replacement bulbs. These are 85-watt bulbs from PhotoSel, and these are full spectrum bulbs. Now essentially what this means is they have a very high CRI, which results in no green tint whatsoever. So for £60 you can buy 2 replacement bulbs, get rid of your 4 green tint bulbs and just replace those, and you have these 2 85-watt bulbs which are actually, each one is brighter than 4 of these. So by doing that replacement you spend an extra 60 quid. Yes, it does cost twice as much, but then you have a light source with no green tint and it's a lot brighter, and that's the set I'm using right now. So I think this is really worthwhile, and this is the main thing that that I'm going to be using this light for, is as a socket in order to put other bulbs in. Now the last thing I want to talk about is flicker. Now it's very common for fluorescent lights to have big problems with banding or flicker, which is essentially that effect where you can see the light kind of moving up and down. It's not desirable at all. Now I've done some tests, and what I found is that at 1/48th, which is the 180-degree shutter, the shutter speed that you should be using pretty much all the time, I found that both lights, both kind of bulbs, work absolutely fine. But any other shutter speed except for 1/94th of a second have quite severe banding. So this means you can't use your camera at 1/60th, 1/120th or any of those other shutter speeds. You do get banding problems. So for me this isn't a big deal at all because I always shoot at 1/48th of a second, but The only time when I wouldn't is if I was doing slow motion. So this is worth bearing in mind, that if you're going to be doing slow motion with these lights, and you're going to set your shutter speed to 1/120th if you're doing 60 frames a second, or 1/240th if you're doing 120 frames a second, for example, then you will have problems with banding. But at the standard shutter speed, which I use pretty much all the time, they work absolutely fine. So, in conclusion, I think these lights are really great. They work brilliantly if you just spend the £75 and adjust manual white balance in your camera, but also it's a great platform to then replace the bulbs and use just the head, because even then £75 for a head is a pretty good price. So yeah, this light has now become my main key light. I've already used it on 2 jobs and I've been really happy with the results. So that's it for this week, and I'll see you next time.